Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie and Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I am your host, Bryan Abercrombie, and with me, as always, is my doc holiday, Sam Sanchez. Sam, how you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. The Jack in your Coke.
That's right. The straw that stirs the drink, right?
That's right.
So we are here today to talk about a very Cavallari divorce, right? We got some recent happenings, which we will talk about, but we also wanted to talk this is part 3 of our 5-part series on dealing with the divorce process, but we thought we could talk a little bit about the Kristin Cavallari, Jay Cutler impending divorce and kind of, work that in maybe as our example and how all this stuff may tie in to a divorce case so that it makes it a little bit more entertaining and I think a little bit more interesting for the listener. Don't you think?
Oh, I think that's a great way for people to we can touch on some complicated subjects, that maybe don't exist in every divorce, but can obviously exist in many. So it's great.
But we also, I know that the Very Cavallari show is extremely popular in my home with my wife. She's what I would call a super fan, and she does like the products, and she does like the store, and she does, she's bought into all of that. So this is obviously a shock to her, as it is. It may be a shock in your home as well. I'm not sure.
No, I agree. I definitely have some viewership happening at my house, and both of them are extremely popular individuals and have, really stardom in their own right. So it's so
just to kind of
one of those star couples.
Just to kind of give a recap, is Jay Cutler and Kristin Cavallari. Kristin Cavallari is of the Hills fame, and then she started her own brand line and a store called Uncommon James. But and Jay Cutler is the all-star quarterback for the Chicago Bears, and then later, I believe, of the Miami Dolphins. They've been married for about 10 years. They have 3 children, and they're both of the stars of this hit TV show on E, I believe, called Very Cavallari. Which chronicles their life, goes through what all the things that they do, and then obviously it goes through the launch of her store, and her products, her brand, and kind of her her life, and really, and so they announced yesterday via Instagram, or at least Kristin Cavallari announced
that social media.
Right, there's a social media aspect in this sucker too. So Kristin Cavallari announces via Instagram yesterday that she's that they are filing for divorce, and they believe it to be amicable, but then obviously, as tabloids do, the tabloids and everything from People to CBS to NBC to CNN to Fox News to TMZ is covering this thing now. There's court filings. There's I think Kristin's accusing Jay of misconduct and asking for custody, and Jay's got his own filing out there too. So looks like we got the makings of quite a dilemma.
Absolutely, Bryan. Everybody you go through things in the relationship. I know that for a long time they'd been together, put out this public, facade of being extremely happy. And so this really comes out of left field for a lot of people, especially their fans. And so let's talk a little bit about, our 3-part series. Obviously, part 3 is we're in the middle of this process. So, as an example, they've already gone through the planning stages. They've already gone through the filing stages. Now what happens? Now we've got, the fray has begun. Where do we go from here?
Well, we've got, in this particular instance, we've got property. We've got, she's got a business that she launched, I believe, from their kitchen table inside the home. And she launched that obviously during the marriage. And then he's obviously got, I guess I would assume, a fairly lucrative NFL contract that he got paid on during the marriage. And so we're assuming, of course, that they don't have any, prenuptial or premarital agreements in this thing. And, we'll be talking about Texas law, but they're obviously going to be getting a divorce in the state of Tennessee, which has completely different divorce law than we have here in Texas. But I think with the property and the custody issues, I think involved in this thing, I think we can probably tie it into what a lot of people might face in their own particular divorce situation.
Oh, without a doubt. So let's take it from Jay's perspective first. I would tell you that obviously, at this point in Texas and in Florida, you're going to want to have what's called the discovery period. And the reason this is, and when people hear that, it really is self-descriptive. Discovery is a party's opportunity to figure out what exists in the estate, okay? And not only that, but to really fish out people's claims. So looking at it from Jay's perspective, obviously the rumors are that Kristin has been alleging for quite some time that he was involved in a adulterous affair with her best friend. And, that went through the tabloids, that went through social media, that went through the TV show, all kinds of things that were out there that all parties vehemently denied. Obviously, Kristin wasn't. She was the one who was asserting it and even asserted it in her pleadings. I think that's Tennessee's version of misconduct is like Texas's version of infidelity, meaning that somebody's gone outside of the marriage and done some things they shouldn't have done.
Correct.
So discovery is your opportunity in Texas and in Florida to issue formal requests for information. So you want to know from Jay's perspective, hey, how much is your business worth, Kristin? How far does it go? How, is it super in debt? Is it not? Is it, there's a lot of liquid capital? In our personal estate, what have you done with all my stuff? Where are my football trophies that you stole from, the house when you got so mad? What are your assertions in relation to the children? Are you wanting to go out and say that you're a better parent and that should be denied access? Or are you wanting to make all the decisions because you're super controlling? Discovery is really a formal process to allow a party to go out there and say, let me see exactly what is at issue in this case so that I know how best to work with my counsel to prepare.
Yes, and then discovery, is really comes in kind of, I look at it as kind of in two elements. There's the element of the children and parental issues portion of it, and then there's the property portion of it. So the property portion of it, from Kristin's side, she's going to be looking at, okay, how much did you make on those, NFL contracts? How much is it worth? We have a farm outside of Nashville. How much is it worth? Whose name is it titled in? And she probably knows the answers to the majority of these questions, but you're going to want to find out more formally, what all's there. How much of that signing bonus do we still have left? How much was spent on gambling? How much, if any, was spent on this, on this affair? All of these kinds of things, she's going to want to find out information. Also, what's your plan with the kids? Where are you planning to live? What do you want your visitation schedule to be? What do you think my visitation schedule should be? All of those kinds of things are all stuff that you can ferret out and learn in discovery. I mean, in Texas, each party is required to submit what's called a sworn inventory and appraisement, which is basically my side is going to say, this is everything that I think separate and community property is in our divorce. And these are the debts, these are the property, this is everything. And I'm swearing to the court that this is what it is. And both sides have to prepare and submit one so that the judge knows what each party is swearing the property is. Now, does that keep people from hiding stuff? No. Does it keep people from, being ornery? No. But it does get you on record so that the penalties can be fairly harsh if you are not disclosing everything or you are lying to the court.
Absolutely. And Bryan, in that, the discovery process, what everybody should understand, whether your estate is small or extremely large, like the Cavallaris, or the Cutlers, I should say, Cutler-Cavallari, I don't know if she took his name or not. But I would tell you, look, if your estate is small or your estate is large, it doesn't matter. But the importance of these questions and the answers that you provide, to your point, Bryan, is dramatic. If you try to withhold information and are caught, or you try to minimize the size of an estate, or you don't fully disclose your intentions in relation to how you want a possession and access schedule to go, or rights and duties associated with children. Why? Because formal discovery serves as a basis for trial preparation, right? This is really what I tell clients. It's where the rubber meets the road, because you will know everybody's going to get down to brass tacks. And I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say the marital estate for the Cutlers in Tennessee is worth $2.5 million estimated. And so in preparing this inventory and appraisement or discovery responses, whatever they may be in that state, let's say Jay sits down there and says, well, you know what, it's a depressed market. The coronavirus has people going crazy. I don't know that we could sell an estate this large. It's really only worth 1.9 million. And Kristen comes back in and says, no way, man, this is like primetime real estate. Everybody wants to move to Nashville. It's like super hot property. They got a great hockey team. The weather's great, and they have great hot chicken. And so,
They do.
Yeah, they do, right? So it's, I'm gonna say that she says it's worth 2.9 million. Okay. So clearly everybody knows that we own this estate. It's very likely going to, or this real property, it's very likely going to be community in the state of Texas, meaning that it was purchased during the marriage. And if they don't have a prenuptial agreement or partition agreement, that would create separate property interest, which is a totally separate and more complicated conversation. But for the purposes of our illustration, it's community. They own it together, but they can't agree on the value. We know that the brass tacks of that is that somebody's going to want to stay with that or sell that or get the value of that. And so discovery really helps you identify where we don't have a meeting of the minds, where lawyers or your competent counsel need to spend time and energy to help work out a solution to the differences.
Yep, that is absolutely spot on.
Well, and the other thing about that, Brian, so like let's say you have differences, and what people always ask, and we'll talk about this in later podcasts, but so what? One, why is discovery so expensive? Well, because it takes a lot of work, lawyer work, legal work. But two, like, why do we do this, and what does it really serve? What's its purpose? Well, when you get to mediation or trial, when I say that it serves as a basis or a foundation for a decision, what I mean by that is everything will play off of that. And so as an example, if I'm Jay and I say, wow, you think it's worth $2.9 million, I'm saying it's worth 1.9. So we've got a lot of distance between us. But I tell you what, I'll let you put it on your side of the ledger because I just got a nice fat property appraisal that came in pretty much at my number. I'll let you take it on your side of the ledger for 2.9 million. And I'll take the other value in assets to my side of the ledger to offset it. So
that's where the big horse trade comes on in a divorce.
And you can just get into terrible situations if you don't do your due diligence or have competent counsel assist you.
Yes, I think that happens that happens a lot, and the value of this thing, when you have disagreements, of value, that could mean big swings. And the other thing that I would caution you on is 401k dollars don't equal the same as dollars in your bank account, and dollars in house equity don't equal the same as dollars in your bank account. So that's something that you you need to have a very long discussion with your attorney about. And what I mean by that is, yes, they're all dollars, but home equity.
Are you saying Uncle Sam takes a chunk? Brian, are you trying to say that the federal government's going to have a hand in your divorce?
I am. I'm saying that a 401k dollar is worth about 70 cents of an actual dollar, whereas a dollar in your bank account is worth $1. So if you're trading your 401k for cash in a bank account, you have to be aware of the differences in the apples and the oranges, because that can cost you a lot of money.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Brian. And not only that, but let's even take a step further. We know Kristen has her own business, right? A business that she created during the marriage. But let's say Kristen says that business is really just her name. Minus the Cavallari name, it's not worth anything. Well, that there's inventory, there's employees, there's brands, there's marketing, there may be copyrights, or patents associated with the products that she's developed. All those potentially have value.
Sure.
Who's going to create the value for that? Do you think she knows?
And at the same
she's a scientist or an appraiser.
Not to play devil's advocate, but at the same time, her name also creates a value for that business as well. So there is a personal and professional goodwill that goes along with her name that a lot of people know and love and the whole nine yards. So in addition to everything you're saying with respect to inventory, patents, potentially all types of intellectual property or whatever with respect to her product line and her stores, you've also got potential for her professional goodwill that is also got to be factored into this, which is not easy.
For sure, because Jay's not going to run her business. It's not like Cutler Cosmetics is going to do as well as Cavallari Cosmetics.
Absolutely.
So and so these are things that are very complex. Discovery is one of those things where really you're going to really understand how valuable your lawyer is when you go through the discovery process, because it's extremely complex. The applications of it are very far reaching, both to your finances and to your family. Because let's just talk about, okay, so we've talked a little bit on the financial pieces of it, Bryan, but what about the family? Like they have three children. What's going to come up in the discovery process?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the separate property element too. I mean, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jay Cutler was a popular NFL quarterback prior to his marriage. Was he not, or was it? Was he?
No, I think I believe you're correct. I think he played ball for a couple of years before she decided that she wanted to marry an NFL player.
Okay, so potentially his first contract coming out, the money that he earned off of his first contract could potentially be, at least from the eyes of a Texas court, potentially some separate property issues, which means this is where your big time, your competent attorney, your needed attorney is going to come into play, because when you've got to prove, a couple of $1 million worth of separate property, the burden in Texas is all on you to prove that. So that's where coming in and gathering the appropriate documents from the appropriate time are going to be crucial to proving your claim. You can't just prove your claim by getting up there and saying, I owned it before I got married. Yeah, look, I was in the paper. I was a NFL quarterback. I was a number one draft choice. Look at where I signed. Look at what it was. That's not good enough. You're going to have somebody come in there with the proper financial documentation and say, here's what we did. We looked back at all of this, and we can conclusively say that this property originated from this check that went into his bank account, and it shows that it is his separate property owned before marriage. That is a high burden to fill, but it sometimes is a necessary burden when you're talking about a lot of money.
Financial tracing is one of the most expensive things that you will do through the discovery process, but it's also definitely one of the most valuable as in relation to maintaining the portion of the estate that belongs to you separately. When we say separate property, I'm going to spend a minute on that. We've touched on this in a couple different podcasts, but it's important to kind of touch back or go back over. Separate property in a community property state. Understanding in the state of Texas, obviously, community property is the presumption. What we mean by that is that if you're married and property comes into being, whether it's personal property, real property, or intellectual property, the overwhelming presumption is that you both own it 100%. That's what community property means, really, and boiled down in a nutshell. But separate property, you have the burden of coming in and saying, no, I have a clear and convincing standard of proof that will show you that this existed either prior to marriage or during marriage. We did some type of legal wrangling that created separate property. Either it was a gift or I inherited it. There's a couple different facets to that you're going to want to talk to counsel about that would create separate property. But if you can prove it through financial tracing, you can carve that property out, and it's not even considered in the divorce, other than to say the court order is going to issue an order that says this is yours. It's not dealt with at all. It doesn't go into the division. It really can do substantial things to an estate, especially a sizable estate like what we're talking about.
And if you're talking about a blended family where you owned property prior to marriage, even if it was a 401k or a retirement account, there may be a substantial amount of separate property that you might want to try to protect, because like Sam said, if it's not on the table in the divorce, it's not on the table to be divided, which means the marital property is all that gets divided, which is really saves you a lot of dollars in the long run. And granted, tracing experts are very expensive because a lot of times they are forensic accountants and they require a lot of documentation and they do a lot of work. But if it saves you a couple of $100,000, the $5,000 or $10,000 you spend on this tracing expert may be well worth it in the end.
Absolutely. So let's just talk through an example, because people might, as listeners might be saying, well, when do I need a tracing expert? So let me give you this as an example. Let's say that Jay got his, I think he was a first round draft pick. So let's say he takes his signing bonus and goes out and buys real property in Nashville, anticipating that this is where he wants to settle down. A few years later, he meets Kristen, they get married. Now they build a house, okay, because she wants a very specific style house. He only parked his double wide trailer out there because he's a country boy. And so they build this house. Well, then they decide, you know what? Nope, we want to change the house and make it bigger, add some additions, whatever it is. A tracing expert is going to be able to go back in and say, okay, I can see, to Brian's point, here's where that signing bonus check went and got deposited into his account. Here's all the multitude of checks that came out from those resources and where they went to. It became foundations, it became contract expenses, it became whatever it is. The court will be able to use that information via testimony from that expert to be able to say, okay, here's the line of demarcation. What portion of it would be potentially, community, and what would be separate? Because Kristen may have brought money into this equation as well. I mean, we don't know what, maybe she comes from a wealthy family, but if
She's got that Hills money,
then
Sam.
she's looking
money from the Hills.
yeah. So there you go. So she's bringing in her Hills money and saying, hey, you know what? Let's build this house on your land. Whose house is it? Who stays with it? How do we determine that? That is the importance and the crux of what a financial expert, a tracing expert can do, but also the difficulty and the consideration of that evidence that's going to be gathered through the discovery process.
Absolutely. And if you can trace it out of there, you could save yourself a considerable amount of money. And then there's also, not to get too far in the weeds, but you have to also potentially prove a reimbursement claim. So if Kristen used her Hills money, let's say, to add a bunch of improvements to Jay's ranch property, then you're talking about her potentially being able to get that money back out of that property.
Agreed. And then you layer on top of this, she's asserting, Brian, that, hey, you know what? He acted, there was misconduct. Okay. Now we're making some assumptions because neither one of us are licensed in the state of Tennessee, but let's just say that misconduct, which is based on her social media allegations, is this infidelity. Can you gather or exchange or find information through the discovery process about infidelity and how can it affect property? Is that something that will happen in discovery as well?
You can take, depositions are one form of evidence. You could call the paramour, the boyfriend or the girlfriend in, have them give a deposition about what exactly, all the pillow talk and all of the things that went on in the relationship. You could find out, some of the sordid details in Texas, at least. I mean, that could have an influence on the property division if a judge is in a mood, so to speak.
Yeah, because one of the most powerful things that an attorney will have, and this is really across the United States typically, is the subpoena power. And a subpoena can be issued by counsel, with live pleadings in place, like a divorce, to gather information. So what do I mean by that? You can issue a subpoena to, let's say, to get hotel records. You can get
records,
credit card records.
Everything.
You can get restaurant records.
I've had people get security cam footage. I mean, you name it.
Exactly. Yeah, issue a subpoena ducis tecum that says, hey, you know what? Kristen's best friend, I want you to show up on this day and time, and I want you to bring your cell phone and your phone records. So let's just see what's out there. These are things that, are extremely powerful digging tools to try to ferret out claims, to prove them or disprove them. Doesn't mean people aren't going to act shady, but, a lot of times you get somebody on the record and, there's the power of perjury, right? Trying to get somebody.
And there's also social media records. You can go back and dig through somebody's Facebook history or their Instagram history or whatever else is out there on social media that you feel like will add credence to your case. Now, all that said, sometimes that doesn't matter. A hill of beans is worth the difference to it. It depends on who your judge is. But in a divorce case like the Cavallaris, where you've got a public eye on this thing, I mean, I think every bit of salacious gossip is probably going to be food for the tabloids, right?
Oh, without a doubt. And when you're talking about preserving a brand, when we talk about stars or high profile individuals, they have a personal brand. And so, the fan of public opinion is fickle and it can blow in any direction. And so if your company is on the rise, but all of a sudden you're going to go through a nasty divorce and they're going to paint you out as a harlot or, this terrible guy who's abusive or having multiple affairs, it can kill a business. It can kill a brand. And so, most of this is
Sure.
typically public record, when you're going through a divorce process. And that's how come everybody's so intrigued by these types of situations. Now, if you're going through divorce, you may not be, Jay Cutler and Kristin Cavallari, and you're not going to have a whole lot of press, but sometimes you can. And sometimes it's just your family members. Sometimes it's, new paramours. It's things that can just
Or
make your life very difficult.
if
Maybe
you're
you're
on
trying to
the
get into a new
or if you're on the
business or,
deacon board
a
at the
new job.
church, or something like that. I mean, sometimes in your social circle that can be a big deal. I mean, if somebody's making adultery allegations about you, um, are other wives going to want their husbands to hang around you, or other women going to let their husbands around you, or if you're on the female side? I mean, all of those kinds of things, all this kind of salacious stuff can really have an impact on you personally. But absolutely, you're absolutely right. It can really have an impact within your own family. But let's jump over to the custody
Yeah.
side
And
of this
so,
thing.
yes. So when you think about, discovery, this is your opportunity to really figure out and help the other party sometimes figure out what it is that they really anticipate an order or a final, outcome will look like post divorce, right? What is life going to look like in
Like,
the future? We're
so
all trying to figure
suppose
that out with COVID.
so
We're trying to figure
suppose
that out through the
Kristen
divorce
says, you know
process.
what? I got this TV show. I got my brand. I got my stores. I want to move to LA. Jay, I know you're a country boy and you like your farm. And I'm not really a farming girl. So maybe I'm just going to move to LA and take the kids. Um, and you stay here in Nashville on the farm. Well, discovery is your chance to find out what the plan is, what her plan is, and what your plan is.
Yeah, it absolutely forces people to make decisions because, a lot of times people will waffle through this process because it's difficult. They don't want to make a decision. They're just kind of like, we'll figure it out. Well, what does that mean? Right? You got to tell me what it means. Like, what time are you proposing you're going to allow me? Are you thinking you're going to give me? Because that's going to tell us if we're going to be able to work out an agreement. If you tell me I'm going to get to see my kids 2 days a month because you're gonna make me buy a plane ticket for them to fly from LA to Nashville, yeah, I'm not liking that scenario. And so it allows me and my counsel to prepare a response that says that's absolutely not what I want. Here's what I'm looking at it because that is not what's in the best interest of my children. This is what's in the best interest of my children. And so once people are forced to identify their positions, truly declare what their intentions are, it allows you and your counsel to sit down and really circle the wagons and decide, how are we going to have to approach this case? Does it look like we're going to have to litigate this matter? Do we need to bring in additional experts to help support my position that that's not in my children's best interest? These are all the
Well,
things
the
that
other thing is,
discovery will
if
bring to
I'm a
light.
dad, let's say, for example, and I'm going for custody, but I'm a traveling salesman and I'm gone, you know, 14, 15 days a month, how am I going to manage being the primary caretaker? And how am I going to manage all of this? And what discovery allows you to do is it allows the wife to go in and say, subpoena all of his work records to show, hey, for the last 2 years, he's traveled, 300 days out of the year. And how can he be primary caretaker of the kids when he's on the road 300 days out of the year? And then at the same time, if you're at home, but you're spending all of your time on social media and not really taking care of the kids, it allows the other parent to go in there and say, hey, look, look at all these phone messages. Look at all this time spent on social media. Look at all this other stuff that my wife claims she's a stay-at-home mom, but look at all this other stuff that she was doing, that shows that she wasn't exactly taking care of the kids when she was in her quote unquote stay-at-home mom role. So so it allows you to kind
Sure.
of drill down on, and I don't mean to imply that stay-at-home moms can't be on social media. Don't take that the wrong way. But what I am saying is, it really allows you to drill down and say, okay, if I'm trying to be the primary parent, how do I prove that I take the majority of the primary caretaking responsibilities? Well, if I'm traveling 300 days out of the year and my wife's taking care of the children, there's no possible way that I have the primary caretaking role, maybe financially speaking, but not in the home. Versus, and if we're, let's say we're both at home, but one person is checked out on social media all the time, well, you can use that to show, hey, look, there's one of us in this relationship that's taking the primary caretaking role within the home, and there's one person that isn't. And social and discovery allows you to get the information that potentially proves those points.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. And look, you and I both know that trial is it's a story. It's the ability of a lawyer to get in there and story tell. Whoever tells the best
Mm-hmm.
story wins. Okay, and so discovery is your opportunity to really ferret out the story. And so in this situation, if Kristen's out there saying, "Hey, you know what? I want to be primary parent, but guess who's going to raise my kids in LA? Two nannies." Because I'm working all the time. I'm constantly at meetings. I'm always doing these TV shows. And Jay's back there saying, hey, I'm a retired NFL football player who has a ton of money. All I do is run around the farm and spend time with the children. Guess what? This is really going to put it in context for a judge to be able to make that determination. Two different styles of life, two different levels of involvement from parents. And how do you figure that out? Discovery
Right.
is
I
the
mean,
way
and
you're
they
going to
say
figure
that
that
I
information
always
out.
tell clients that building a case in a divorce case is a lot like building a house. You have to do it brick by brick, and and it's not just about pointing out why the other person's bad. You also have to show why you're better. So Jay would have to get up there and say, not only is she spending all this time on the show and not with the kids, here's the things that I'm able to provide. I'm able to do the pickup and drop offs at school. I'm able to help with the homework and provide the transportation. And Kristen may be coming over there saying, well, no, he was completely checked out, and I was doing all of that in addition to manning a full-time job and running a company. And so this would give her the opportunity to say, okay, this is what Jay was doing, and this is how I provide better. This is how these are the things that I do. I was the one actually making. Maybe I was having the nanny take the kids to school, but I'm the one who had to coordinate the nanny because I had to be at work and Jay wasn't doing anything. So those are all of the kinds of questions that get answered when you're doing this discovery. And let's talk a little bit about custody evaluations. Let's get into
Sure,
that in a
Jay.
second, but go ahead and make your point, Sam.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, absolutely a great point there, Brian. Because if Jay's spending all of his time at the country club, he's whining and dining with friends and playing, 3 rounds of golf and getting home at 8 o'clock at night, to kiss the kids goodnight and then going back down to pour himself a Jack and Coke. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter how much Kristen's working. If she needs the help of a nanny, then, that's a lifestyle that's already in place. Because to your point, this is where clients, I try to tell them, right? Like, judges are like water in a river. Water's been flowing that way for a long time. And so what you're doing in the discovery process is you're really creating a cartography of life, of that river. How has it been flowing? So that a judge can look at that, because judges are like water. They follow the path of least resistance a lot of time. If something is working in the lives of children and you can prove it, then they're going to follow it. So
The big
discovery really
keys
becomes
you
that
look at are
process to highlight
stability
that.
and consistency, and that's what judges are looking for, to place kids in environments with the same stability and the same consistency that they've always had. But let's talk about custody evaluators, because this is an important part of the discovery process. One or both parties can ask for a court to potentially appoint a custody evaluator, and those can come in the form of a psychiatrist. Sometimes it's an ad litem attorney. Sometimes it's an amicus attorney. But this attorney or this custody evaluator is going to take a look at both homes, both sets of parents, probably extended family, probably some close relations. You're going to have to provide documentation. You're going to have to provide references. You're going to have to fill out paperwork that says what your plans are for the kids. And this person takes all of this information, interviews the children in a lot of cases, and then makes a determination and recommends to the court that either mom or dad gets primary custody of these children. And that's important, because if you come out on the wrong side of that, in Texas, we have the opportunity for jury trials. So if you come out on the wrong side of that, you're going to have to get ammunition and evidence to show maybe why this custody evaluator's opinion was biased, or why this opinion wasn't the correct opinion. You're going to have to potentially get a rebuttal expert, things like that. So you really want to know that information early on.
Yeah, without question, they are valuable pieces of the discovery process, because to a judge, from a judge's perspective, look, a judge is never going to go to your house. They're never going to come in and interview people. They're going to get to hear very small snippets of people's impressions on the stand. What a child custody evaluator has the opportunity to do is spend hours and hours of time. They can fly all across the country. They can see, different environments, and they get to see the children in each of those environments before writing these reports. These reports, can go upwards of 300 pages, and they can be very detailed and take on very complicated issues and lifestyles and perspectives to put together a very cohesive statement to the court that says, I've been there, I've done this, I've seen these people, I've talked to them, and based on all that information, here is what I believe could be in the best interest of these children, and they are worth their weight in platinum.
But that being said, I mean, sometimes if you come in out on the wrong side of one of these, it doesn't necessarily mean, they're created by people, and people are fallible. So, you really have to evaluate that report and see where potentially you could poke holes in it. And, that sometimes takes a lot of effort, a lot of review. I mean, like you said, if you're in the case of a 300, the biggest one I ever saw was over 1,000 pages. And that included, exhibit after exhibit and thousands of pages of supporting documentation. So, people, there are good custody evaluators and there are bad ones. So it's one of those things where you have to know the playing field, and you have to really look at and review the information that's provided, and what they're basing that opinion on, because they may be basing an opinion on information that one spouse or the other spouse provided that is not accurate, and you may have the documentation that proves that it's not accurate. So you want to be able to go to that custody evaluator and say, hey, look, I know they told you this. I know Jay said he never played 3 rounds of golf, but here's the country club records from the last 2 years, and he played three rounds of golf 3 times a week. So, those are very critical pieces of information, and it's like one of those public service announcements back when we were kids. It's the more you know. The more you know, and in your divorce case, the better off you're going to be.
Oh, without a doubt, Bryan. And you made the perfect point about a true litigator, right? True competent counsel that feels comfortable in the courtroom or out of the courtroom. They're going to spend a tremendous amount of time and energy dissecting those reports, making sure that the person who was responsible and tasked with those reports did their due diligence and actually has the proper foundation to make any type of recommendation to the court. And if they don't, this is the value of competent counsel. This is the time when I told you before, you're going to really learn to appreciate your lawyer through the discovery process, because if they do what they're supposed to do at a very high level, you're going to come out of the other end fully prepared to either settle this case, informally or via mediation, or absolutely be prepared.
And let's say you get to the end of this and you're looking at your bill and you say, look, I spent $30,000 on just the discovery phase of this case at all. But suppose that attorney saves you $150,000 in separate property plus an additional $150,000 to $200,000 by getting the right valuations on your property. Then you're going to say, well, that $30,000 investment wasn't badly spent because he saved me $400,000. So, or that lawyer helped you, maintain primary conservatorship and keep your children from moving across the country to where you'd only see them one time a month, if that. I mean, what are your children worth to you? What's the lifestyle of maintaining a relationship with your children and being an active and involved parent? What dollar amount is that worth? To most parents, you couldn't put a dollar value on that. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has $30, $50, $100,000 to spend on the discovery process, because it can get up there. But you can work with your counsel to really strategize and formulate a plan of what of these elements you can use through the discovery process to maximize your dollars and maximize the potential for you to get a positive outcome if you have to. Because mediation is just as important. Having all of the documentation and having as much knowledge as you can walking into a mediation session can be just as important as having enough knowledge walking into a trial setting. So the last 2 parts to our 5-part series are going to talk about, mediation and then trial specifically. So we'll touch on those, in later episodes. But this discovery process, I mean, how long can the discovery process go? It can go 9 months. It can go a year. Sometimes it can go less time than that. So you want to start gathering all of this stuff and as much documentation related to your claims as early as possible, because the more stuff you have, the faster your attorney is going to be able to go through it, and the faster you could potentially get an outcome. So you don't want your attorney having to review discovery at the last possible minute. So I would tell you that early is better in this type of situation.
Yep. I always tell clients, if you drink, get an adult beverage. If you don't, get a nice glass of iced tea. Spend some quality time with your discovery, because it's going to be worth
Because
the
there is going to be.
investment of time
Go
and
ahead.
energy. Because no, I was just going to say, here's the thing that's most important in my mind, is that discovery takes people from being unrealistic to being realistic really quickly. Now it doesn't fix crazy. You and I both know, Brian. There's crazy out there that you can't fix with the most amount of discovery you could possibly imagine. If it's crazy on the other side, discovery is not going to help you convince them to settle. But if there's sanity on the other side, it does, because it helps people understand where they are being unrealistic in their expectations, brings realism into the conversation. And once people are realistic, they a lot of times can come to a happy medium.
I was just going to say, let's touch briefly on the documentation that you're required to provide. In a lot of instances, you're going to be required to fill out at least a preliminary inventory and probably a financial information statement. And let's talk about how much time you're supposed to spend on those things. And what I would say is, do you spend 5 minutes doing your taxes? Do you check a couple of boxes on the TurboTax forms, sign your name to it, and send it off to old Uncle Sam? No. You spend hours and hours compiling records and reviewing your pay stubs and reviewing all of your stuff before you file your taxes, because you don't want to end up in an audit situation. What I would tell you to do.
Somebody's going to audit that. You think how many times do you think the IRS audits IRS forms, Brian?
A lot.
If you had to guess, maybe 1 out of every 100, maybe lower, maybe less, but it's a big number. But I guarantee you, to your point, Brian, every time somebody issues a discovery and
Absolutely.
it's going to get audited. The other side is auditing your discovery.
Don't be casual and flippant about answering these questions. What I would tell you is take the time necessary, spend the time that you think you need to make sure it's right and it's the way you want it. Because and when you're talking about things like sworn interrogatories or things like that, you're talking about answers that they're potentially going to hold you to later on in the process. So you want to make sure you put some thought and some effort into this discovery process so that you are the best prepared possible when you go into that trial or that mediation.
Yep. One wrong move in the discovery process can cost you thousands, can hurt your family, can be devastating at trial or mediation. So it's
so don't be flippant about it. Take the time necessary. And do you have any parting thoughts?
All I can tell you, Brian, is that I hope Jay and Kristen work it out. I hope they reconcile. I know that it would make my household happy to know that this superstar couple, hangs out together, because it gives people hope for the future. But if not, I do hope that, they're sensible and don't spend a lot of time and money fighting about things that they don't need to, but that they're very clear about their expectations through the discovery process. Because to our points here, if you're not, you're just creating massive problems. But we'll read about it in the news. It'll be
yes, and I would echo the same sentiment. Sure. I mean, you hope for they have three very beautiful, very young children, and you want to make sure couples a lot of times staying together, and if they're able to reconcile marriages, a lot of times that's better for the children than going back and forth between houses. But sometimes that's possible, and sometimes that's not possible. But let's hope that cooler heads will prevail in this Cavallari-Cutler divorce, and that they both, decide that, hey, the children are important. They need to have both parents in their lives, and we're gonna each take the high road in our own respective way, and try to do what's best for our children. So, you hope for a reconciliation, but at the same time, if they can't reconcile, then you hope that they're good co-parents, on down the road.
Spoken like a true champion of the
yes, sir.
The family.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, and like I said, our next podcast will be to discuss the mediation phase of the divorce process in Texas. And if you need to reach out to one of us, you can reach me at 281-374-4741 or B. Abercrombie at astxlegal.com. And Sam, where can they find you?
You can hit me up at 469-844-7181, or you can hit me at ssanchez at astxlegal.com.
All right. Thank you. Thank you much. And thank you for listening. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.